She threw my suitcase onto the front porch. "You have no place in this house anymore," she screamed. It was only one day after my husband's funeral. What she didn't know was that the deed to that house had been secretly transferred into my name by my late husband just 1 month earlier. The rain hammered against the windows of the Hartwell mansion that October morning, each drop seeming to echo the hollow emptiness in my chest. James had been gone for exactly 24 hours. 24 hours since I'd watched them lower his casket into the cold earth. 24 hours since I'd become a widow at 42. I stood in the grand foyer of the house that had never truly felt like home, staring at Victoria Hartwell, my mother-in-law, as she descended the curved staircase like a queen approaching her execution chamber. Her black dress was immaculate. Her silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face into a permanent expression of disdain. She'd always looked at me that way. For 15 years of marriage, I'd been the outsider who'd stolen her precious son. "Emma," she said, my name dripping from her lips like poison. "We need to talk." I knew that tone. I'd heard it countless times before, when I'd suggested repainting the dining room, when I'd wanted to host Thanksgiving at our own place, when I'd mentioned maybe, just maybe, James and I could make our own decisions. But this time, something in her voice was different, sharper, final. "Of course, Victoria," I replied, keeping my voice steady even as my hands trembled. I'd learned long ago not to show weakness in front of this woman. She reached the bottom of the stairs and walked past me into the sitting room, expecting me to follow. I always followed. The sitting room was her domain, filled with antiques that belonged to Hartwell ancestors, portraits of stern-faced relatives who seemed to judge me from their gilded frames, and that horrible Victorian settee that was about as comfortable as sitting on concrete. Victoria settled into her usual chair, the high-backed one, positioned to catch the morning light, making her look like she was holding court. I remained standing. She hadn't invited me to sit, and in this house you waited for permission. "I'll be direct," she began, folding her hands in her lap with practiced precision. "This house has been in the Hartwell family for 3 generations. James's grandfather built it. His father expanded it. And James," her voice caught, the first crack in her armor I'd seen since the accident, "James loved it."
I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. James had loved this house, but he'd also resented it, resented how it chained him to his mother's expectations, to a legacy that felt more like a prison than a privilege. "As you know," Victoria continued, her composure restored, "this house, along with most of the Hartwell estate, was always meant to stay in the family, the proper family." She emphasized those last 2 words, and I felt them like a slap. "Victoria, She held up her hand, silencing me. How many times had that gesture cut me off mid-sentence over the years? How many opinions had I swallowed? How many feelings had I buried just to keep the peace? "You've been a adequate wife to my son," she said, the pause before adequate, speaking volumes. But let's not pretend this was a love match. James married beneath himself, and we both know it. The words should have hurt more than they did. Maybe I'd grown numb to her insults. Or maybe grief had stripped away my ability to feel anything beyond the crushing loss of the man I actually loved, despite what his mother believed. I married James because I loved him, I said quietly, and for the first time in our long, cold relationship, I didn't look away from her gaze. Whether you believe that or not doesn't change the truth. Something flickered across her face, maybe surprise that I'd spoken back to her, but it vanished quickly, replaced by that familiar mask of superiority. Love, she scoffed. You loved the Hartwell name. You loved the security. A school teacher from nowhere marrying into one of Willow Creek's founding families. She leaned forward slightly. But now James is gone, and there's no reason for you to continue this charade. My heart began to pound. Charade? You don't belong here, Emma. You never did. This house, this family, this legacy, it's not yours. It never was. She stood, smoothing her dress with both hands. I want you gone by the end of the week. I'll have Marcus draw up whatever paperwork is necessary. You'll receive a modest settlement, of course. I'm not heartless, but you need to leave. The room seemed to tilt. You're kicking me out? The day after we buried your son? I'm reclaiming my family's home, she corrected. James would understand. He always knew his duties to this family came first. Did he, though? I thought of the late-night conversations James and I had shared, whispered in the darkness of our bedroom, the only room in this entire mansion where Victoria's influence couldn't reach. He'd talked about leaving, about starting fresh somewhere his mother's shadow couldn't find us, but he'd always been too afraid to actually do it, too conditioned to obey.
Or so I'd thought. I need time, I managed to say, my mind racing. I need to process. You've had time. You've had 15 years in this house. That's more than generous. Victoria walked to the window, looking out over the manicured gardens that had been her husband's pride before he'd passed away 5 years ago. I've already contacted a realtor about potential tenants. This house is far too large for one person, and the maintenance costs are substantial. I'll be moving to the cottage on the east grounds. She'd planned this. While I'd been selecting flowers for my husband's casket, while I'd been trying to write a eulogy that would capture the man James had been when his mother wasn't watching, she'd been plotting my removal. Have you ever felt so betrayed that you couldn't even form words? That's where I was in that moment, standing in that suffocating sitting room, realizing that I'd never been more than a temporary inconvenience to this woman. The cottage, I repeated numbly. The East Cottage was a charming 2-bedroom home on the edge of the property, completely renovated last year. James and I had talked about maybe moving there ourselves one day, creating some distance from his mother while remaining technically on the family grounds. It had been a compromise we'd never gotten to execute. Yes, it's more appropriate for a woman of my age, and frankly, I can't bear to live in this house with James's ghost in every room.
Her voice hardened again. "But I'll be damned if I let someone who married into this family walk away with the Hartwell legacy." I should have argued. I should have pointed out that I was still legally James's widow, that surely I had some rights here. But I was so tired. Tired of fighting for scraps of dignity in this house. Tired of being treated like hired help who'd somehow tricked her way into the family. Tired of being Emma Carson, the woman who would never be good enough. "I'll need to go through James's things," I said softly, because even now, even facing eviction from my own home, I was trying to be reasonable. "Take what you like from his personal effects. The family heirlooms stay naturally. And the furniture, the artwork, I don't want your furniture, Victoria." The words came out sharper than I'd intended. "I just want the things that mattered to James. His books, his photographs, the box of his father's letters he kept in his study." She waved her hand dismissively. "Fine, whatever. Just be gone by Friday. That gives you 4 days. Surely that's sufficient time for someone who came into this marriage with nothing."
That was it then. 15 years reduced to 4 days of packing. 15 years of trying to build a life in a house that had fought me at every turn, with a mother-in-law who'd made it her mission to remind me daily that I was an intruder. I turned to leave, my legs feeling like they might give out beneath me. "Oh, and Emma," Victoria's voice stopped me at the doorway. "I trust you'll be discreet about this arrangement. I wouldn't want people in town getting the wrong impression. As far as anyone else is concerned, you're moving on to start fresh after your tragic loss. Isn't that what young widows do?" I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to speak without screaming. Instead, I walked out of that sitting room, through the foyer, and up the grand staircase to the bedroom I'd shared with James. Our bedroom was exactly as we'd left it the morning of the accident. James had been running late for a meeting in Hartford, something about the family's investment portfolio that his mother had insisted he handle personally. I'd made him coffee, kissed him goodbye, told him I loved him. He'd hugged me tighter than usual, held on just a few seconds longer. "I've got something to tell you when I get back," he'd said, his eyes bright with something I couldn't quite name. Excitement? Nervousness? Something important. Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. 3 hours later, a truck had run a red light, and James Hartwell was gone. I never found out what he wanted to tell me. I sank onto our bed, finally allowing the tears to come. The funeral had required composure. Victoria's presence had required strength. But here, surrounded by James' things, his reading glasses on the nightstand, his robe still hanging on the bathroom door, the biography he'd been reading with a bookmark holding his place, I could finally break. My phone buzzed. "Rebecca. Checking on you. Did Victoria leave? Want me to come over?" Rebecca had been my lifeline through all of this. My best friend since college. She'd been the one who'd encouraged me to go on that first date with James 17 years ago. She'd been my maid of honor, the person who talked me down from leaving this marriage more times than I could count,
and the first person I called when the police showed up at my door. I typed back, "She's kicking me out, wants me gone by Friday." The phone rang immediately. "She what?" Rebecca's outrage was almost comforting. At least someone else saw how insane this was. "She says the house is family property, that I don't belong here." I wiped my eyes, trying to pull myself together. Maybe she's right, Beck. Maybe I never belonged in this world. "Don't you dare," Rebecca snapped. "Don't you dare let that woman make you feel less than. You gave 15 years to that family. You put up with her constant criticism, her little digs, her ridiculous demands. You earned your place in that house." Did I, though? I stood, walking to the window that overlooked the back gardens. Or was I just fooling myself? James is gone, and without him, my voice broke. Without him, I'm nothing here. Just the gold digger school teacher who trapped the Hartwell heir. "Emma Carson, you listen to me." "I have to pack," I interrupted, because I couldn't handle Rebecca's kindness right now. Kindness would shatter me completely. "I'll call you later, okay?" I ended the call before she could protest, before I could fall apart entirely. For the rest of that day, I moved through the house like a ghost. I pulled boxes from the attic, ironically, boxes I'd used when I'd moved into this house 15 years ago. Full circle. I started in James's study, carefully packing his books, his papers, the framed photos of us that Victoria had never allowed to be displayed in the main rooms. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a folder I had never seen before. It was tucked beneath some old tax returns, hidden deliberately. The tab read, "Important, EC." EC. Emma Carson. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were documents, legal documents, and on top, a letter in James's handwriting dated exactly 1 month before his death. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything, for not standing up to my mother sooner, for making you live in her shadow, for being too weak to give you the life you deserved. But I'm trying to fix that now. I'm finally doing what I should have done years ago. The documents in this folder are copies. Marcus has the originals. 4 weeks ago, I transferred the deed to this house into your name. The Hartwell mansion is yours, Emma. Not my mother's, yours. I did it quietly because I knew if Mother found out, she'd find a way to stop it. She'd guilt me, manipulate me, remind me of every Hartwell duty and legacy and expectation. And I'm ashamed to say, she might have succeeded. I've spent my whole life being afraid of disappointing her. But I'm more afraid of disappointing you. This house should have been ours from the beginning. It will be yours now. Mother has the cottage and a substantial trust fund. She'll be furious, but she'll be fine. You, my love, deserve a home where you're not just tolerated, but celebrated, where you can finally hang those photos you love, where you can paint the walls whatever color makes you happy, where you can live without walking on eggshells. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you this to your face. I'm sorry for so many things. But know this, you were never the gold digger she accused you of being. You were the woman who saw past the Hartwell name and loved me, just James, not the family legacy. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. The house is yours. Marcus will confirm everything. Don't let her bully you. For once in your life with my family, don't back down. All my love, always. James. I read the letter 3 times, my vision blurring with tears. Then I looked at the documents beneath it. The deed transfer, signed and notarized. Official, legal, irrefutable. The Hartwell mansion wasn't Victoria's to give away. It was mine. And she had no idea. I sat on the floor of James's study for what felt like hours, clutching that letter to my chest. The rain had stopped, and pale afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Everything I'd believed about my place in this family, about my future, had just shifted on its axis. The house was mine. James had given it to me, not as an afterthought, not as a consolation prize, but deliberately, secretly. 1 month before his death, he'd finally found the courage to stand up to his mother, even if he'd done it behind her back. "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you this to your face," he'd written. "Oh, James, even in death, you're still apologizing for her." My phone buzzed again. Rebecca. Of course. She'd been texting every 30 minutes since our call, increasingly worried messages that I'd been ignoring. But this time, I answered. "I found something," I said without preamble. "Emma, are you okay? You sound—" James transferred the house to me 1 month before he died. "It's mine, Beck. The Hartwell mansion is legally mine." Silence on the other end. Then, what? I told her everything. The hidden folder, the letter, the deed transfer. By the time I finished, Rebecca was practically shouting into the phone.
That manipulative witch. She knew she had no right to kick you out. She was counting on you not knowing, counting on you being too grief-stricken to fight back. "I don't think she knows," I said slowly, the pieces falling into place. "The letter says Marcus has the originals, James's lawyer. If Victoria knew the house was in my name, she never would have tried this. She would have found another way to push me out, but not this direct." "So what are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? Part of me, the part that had spent 15 years trying to keep peace, trying to be the daughter-in-law Victoria would never accept, wanted to show her the documents right now, to end this farce before it went any further, to prove that I had every right to be in this house. But another part of me, a part I hadn't known existed until this moment, wanted something different. I wanted her to feel what I'd felt for 15 years, powerless, small, unwanted. I wanted revenge. "Emma?" Rebecca's voice pulled me back. "You still there?" "I'm going to let her think she's won," I said quietly. "I'm going to pack my things. I'm going to play the meek little widow who knows her place. And then, when the will is read next week—" I paused, a plan forming in my mind. "Then she'll find out the truth in front of everyone." "Oh my God!" Rebecca's tone shifted from concern to something almost gleeful. "You're serious?" Completely. I stood, carefully placing the documents back in their folder. James said not to back down. For the first time in my life with this family, I'm not going to. "I love this for you. I love this so much." Rebecca was fully on board now. "What do you need me to do?" "Can I stay with you just for a few days until the will reading? I need Victoria to think I've actually left." "My guest room is yours." "But Emma, are you sure about this? It's going to be brutal when she finds out. Was I sure? I looked around James's study at the life we'd tried to build in the margins of his mother's control. I thought about every dismissive comment, every suggestion that was really a command, every holiday ruined by her constant criticism. I thought about how she'd waited exactly 1 day after burying her son to throw me out of my own home.
I've never been more sure of anything, I said. Over the next 3 days, I played my role perfectly. I packed my belongings with theatrical resignation, loading boxes into my car while Victoria watched from the sitting room window. I called Marcus Chen, James's lawyer, and asked, in a voice carefully calibrated to sound defeated, when the will reading would take place. Monday morning, 10 o'clock, Marcus had said, his tone professional, but somehow knowing. Emma, I need to speak with you about... That's fine, Marcus. I'll be there. I'd cut him off before he could reveal anything. If Victoria happened to be listening, I needed her to hear nothing suspicious. Marcus had paused. I see. Well, Monday then. And Emma? James made certain provisions, important ones. I understand. Thank you, Marcus. I'd ended the call and found Victoria standing in the doorway of the bedroom, watching me pack James's books. I've arranged for the locks to be changed on Saturday. You'll need to leave your keys on the hall table when you go. Of course, Victoria. And the will reading is Monday. You'll want to be there, I suppose. Marcus mentioned something about a small bequest for you. James was always sentimental. She said it like sentiment was a weakness, something to be pitied. I'd wanted to scream at her then, to throw the truth in her face, to watch her perfectly composed mask crack. But I'd swallowed it all down, the way I'd swallowed down 15 years of insults. I'll be out by Friday evening, I had said instead. Good. And she'd left, satisfied that she had won. Friday evening came. Rebecca had helped me move the last boxes to her place, a cozy townhouse on the other side of Willow Creek. As I placed my keys on the hall table of the Hartwell mansion for what I pretended would be the last time, I allowed myself one final walk through the rooms. The sitting room, where I'd never been quite comfortable enough. The dining room, where I'd hosted countless dinners for Victoria's friends, always feeling like the help rather than the hostess. The kitchen, where I'd actually been happy, cooking meals that James loved, away from his mother's critical gaze. And our bedroom, the place where James and I had been just us, where the Hartwell legacy couldn't quite reach. I stood in the doorway, remembering the man who'd loved me enough to finally defy his mother, even if he'd done it too late, too quietly. I won't back down, I whispered to his ghost. I promise. I locked the door behind me, knowing I had another key, the master key that James had given me years ago, hidden in my jewelry box, and drove to Rebecca's house. Victoria watched from the sitting room window. I could feel her satisfaction radiating through the glass. Let her enjoy it. She had 3 more days of victory. The weekend crawled by.
Rebecca tried to distract me with movies and wine and increasingly elaborate revenge fantasies, but I could barely focus. I kept thinking about Monday, about the moment when Victoria would finally understand what James had done. Would she rage? Would she cry? Would she try to contest it somehow? Part of me felt guilty for taking pleasure in anticipating her shock, but a larger part of me, the part that remembered every cruel comment, every dismissal, every reminder that I'd never be good enough, felt something else entirely. Justice. Sunday evening, Rebecca and I sat on her couch, reviewing the plan for the 100th time. You'll go to Marcus's office. The will reading is at 10. Victoria will be there, probably some other relatives. Marcus will read through the standard stuff, the investment accounts, the personal effects, the charitable donations. Rebecca was counting on her fingers, fully invested in this drama now. And then he'll get to the house. And then he'll get to the house, I repeated. And Victoria's face will be absolutely priceless. Rebecca grinned. I wish I could be there to see it. You'll get a full report. I managed a small smile, my first real one since James's death. Damn right I will. She squeezed my hand. Emma, you know this is going to change things, right? This isn't just about the house. Once Victoria knows that James chose you over her, over the family legacy she's been guarding like a dragon, she's not going to forgive this.
I don't want her forgiveness. The words came out harder than I'd intended. I want her to know that James saw through her manipulation, that in the end, he chose me. That's enough. But was it? Even as I said it, doubt crept in. Was I doing this for James, or was I doing it for myself? Was this about honoring my husband's last gift? Or was it about finally making Victoria Hartwell feel as small as she'd made me feel? Maybe it was both. Maybe that was okay. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable sunshine, as if the universe wanted to spotlight this particular drama. I dressed carefully. A simple black dress, understated jewelry, my hair pulled back. The grieving widow, composed and dignified. I wanted to look like someone who'd accepted her fate, not someone who was about to drop a bomb on her former mother-in-law's life. Marcus Chen's law office was in downtown Willow Creek, in one of those restored colonial buildings that screamed old money and established families. I'd been here once before, when James and I had updated our wills 5 years ago. Victoria had insisted on being present for that meeting too, making sure we weren't doing anything that would compromise the Howell legacy. The reception area was exactly as I remembered it. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, certificates and degrees covering the walls. The receptionist, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, looked up as I entered. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm so sorry for your loss. Mr. Chen is expecting you. Conference room B, down the hall to the left." I thanked her and walked down the corridor, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. With each step, my heart beat faster. This was it, the moment everything changed. The conference room door was partially open. I could hear voices inside. Victoria's, crisp and controlled, and Marcus's deeper tones. I paused just outside, gathering my courage. "And are you absolutely certain there are no complications? I need to know the house situation is settled. I've already spoken with contractors about renovations to the cottage." Mrs. Hartwell, as I've said, the will reading will clarify all property matters. Perhaps we should wait until everyone is present before we discuss. Everyone is here except for Emma, and she's hardly relevant to the important decisions. She'll get her little bequest and disappear. That's how these things work. I stepped into the room. Good morning, Victoria, Marcus. Victoria turned, her expression flickering between surprise and annoyance. She expected me to slink in quietly, apologetically. Instead, I met her gaze directly, something I'd rarely done in all our years together.
Emma. How? Prompt. She turned back to Marcus. Well, now that everyone's here, shall we begin? I have appointments this afternoon. Marcus gestured to the chairs around the conference table. Please, sit. There are a few others joining us. James's cousin David, his Aunt Margaret, but we can begin with the preliminaries. As I took my seat across from Victoria, I noticed Marcus watching me carefully. There was something in his expression, a subtle acknowledgement, as if he knew exactly what was about to happen and was curious to see how I'd handle it. The next 15 minutes passed in a blur as James's relatives trickled in. Aunt Margaret, who'd always been kind to me in a distant sort of way. Cousin David, who'd barely spoken to me at the funeral. A few others I recognized from family gatherings, all wearing the appropriate expressions of somber grief mixed with barely concealed curiosity about what they might inherit. Victoria held court at the head of the table, accepting condolences with practiced grace, the perfect picture of the dignified matriarch. She'd always been good at performances. Finally, Marcus stood, a leather portfolio in his hands. Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time, and I appreciate your patience. James was very thorough in his estate planning, and he left explicit instructions for how his affairs should be handled. He opened the portfolio, pulling out several documents. First, the standard disclaimers and readings. James's will was last updated 3 months ago, with several important amendments made 1 month before his passing. Marcus's eyes flicked to me for just a second. All changes were witnessed, notarized, and are legally binding. Victoria shifted in her seat, suddenly alert. Changes? What changes? James didn't mention any changes to me. Mr. Hartwell was entitled to update his will as he saw fit, Marcus said smoothly. Now, if we may proceed, he began reading. The investment accounts, most going to Victoria, with substantial amounts to various charities James had supported, his personal effects, his watch to cousin David, some family heirlooms to Aunt Margaret, his book collection to the public library in his name, and now we come to the matter of real property, specifically the Hartwell Mansion located at 1847 Willow Creek Drive. Victoria sat uprighter, a small smile playing at her lips. This was her moment, the moment when everyone would see that the family estate remained exactly where it belonged. The property, known as the Hartwell Mansion, Marcus continued, his voice steady, was transferred via quitclaim deed on September 15th to Mrs. Emma Carson Hartwell. This transfer was completed 1 month before Mr. Hartwell's death and is a matter of public record. Therefore, the Hartwell Mansion is not part of James's estate and is not subject to distribution through this will. It is, and was at the time of his death, the sole property of his widow. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop in that conference room. Every face turned to me, shock, confusion, calculation running across their features in rapid succession.
But I only watched Victoria. Her face had gone completely white, her mouth opening and closing without sound. For the first time in the 15 years I'd known her, Victoria Hartwell was speechless. "That's impossible," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "The house is Hartwell property. It's been in the family for 3 generations. James would never." "James did." Marcus pulled out a copy of the deed transfer, sliding it across the table to Victoria. It was his legal right to transfer property that was in his name, and he exercised that right. Mrs. Emma Hartwell is the legal owner of the Hartwell mansion. Victoria's hand shook as she picked up the document, her eyes scanning it frantically, looking for some loophole, some mistake, but there was none. James's signature was clear. The notary stamp was official. The filing date was undeniable. "He deceived me," she breathed, and for the first time I heard something other than confidence in her voice. "He went behind my back, his own mother." "He made a decision about his own property," I said quietly, speaking for the first time since the reading began. "A decision about our home." Her eyes snapped to mine, and the look she gave me was pure venom. "You did this. You manipulated him. You got into his head and made him betray his family." "Actually," Marcus interjected, "I have a letter from James explaining his reasoning. Would you like me to read it, or would you prefer to read it privately?" "Read it," Victoria spat. "I want everyone here to see what kind of woman could turn a son against her mother." Marcus hesitated, glancing at me. I nodded. Let her hear it. Let them all hear it. He pulled out another document, James's letter, different from the one I'd found, but clearly similar in content. "To my family," Marcus began reading, "I know the transfer of the Hartwell mansion to Emma will come as a surprise, particularly to my mother. But I need you all to understand that this decision was my own, made with full awareness and deliberation."
The letter went on. James explained how he'd watched his mother undermine our marriage for years, how he'd been too afraid to stand up to her, how the house had become a symbol of everything wrong between us, his inability to put his wife first, Victoria's refusal to accept that her son had his own life. "Emma deserves a home where she is the mistress, not the tolerated guest," Marcus read, and I had to blink back tears. "She deserves to make decisions without my mother's approval. She deserves to live without constant criticism. I failed to give her this while I was alive. This is my attempt to correct that failure." Victoria's face was no longer white. It was red, flushed with rage and humiliation. Everyone in the room was staring at her now, understanding exactly what James had meant. "Mother, I hope you can forgive me someday, but I'm not sorry for this decision. Emma was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I should have told you that years ago. I should have defended her. I should have made you see what I saw. A kind, patient, loving woman who put up with more than anyone should have to. The house is hers. Let that be the end of it. Love, James." Marcus
carefully folded the letter and set it down. The silence in the room was deafening. Have you ever watched someone's entire worldview shatter in real time? That's what I witnessed in that moment. Victoria had built her identity on being the guardian of the Hartwell legacy, the keeper of family traditions. And her son, her precious James, had rejected all of it, had chosen me over her. "This isn't over," Victoria finally said, her voice shaking. "I'll contest this. I'll find a way to—" "There's no legal grounds for contestation," Marcus said firmly. "The transfer was completed while James was alive, of sound mind, and with proper legal counsel. I was present for the signing. It's ironclad." Victoria stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "You," she turned to me, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You have stolen my family's home. You've destroyed my son's legacy. I didn't steal anything." I stood too, facing her, and for the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel small in her presence. "James gave me the house because he loved me, because he knew what you'd do the second he was gone. Exactly what you did do. You kicked me out within 24 hours of his funeral, Victoria. You proved him right." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. What could she say? Everyone in this room had heard Marcus read James's letter. They all knew exactly what she'd done. "The house is mine," I continued, my voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside me. "James made sure of that, and there's nothing you can do to change it." I turned to Marcus. "Is there anything else you need from me today?"
"No, Mrs. Hartwell. I'll send you copies of all relevant documents. And," he paused, something almost like pride in his expression, "James would be glad you're standing up for yourself." I nodded, gathering my purse. As I walked toward the door, I passed Victoria, still frozen in place, her world crumbling around her. "I'll have the locks changed back by this evening," I said quietly, just for her. "And, Victoria, you can keep the cottage. James left that to you. But the mansion, my home, is no longer yours to give away." I walked out of that conference room with my head high, leaving behind 15 years of trying to earn a place in a family that would never accept me. I didn't need their acceptance anymore. I had something better. I had justice. The drive back to Rebecca's house felt surreal. My hands were still shaking on the steering wheel, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I'd actually done it. I'd stood up to Victoria Hartwell, and I'd won. My phone rang before I even pulled into Rebecca's driveway. Her name flashed on the screen. "Tell me everything," she demanded the second I answered. I laughed, actually laughed for the first time in what felt like weeks. "Can I at least get inside first?" "Absolutely not. I've been pacing for 2 hours. Start talking." So I did. I told her about Victoria's confidence walking into that conference room, about the moment Marcus announced the deed transfer,
about the look on Victoria's face when she realized what James had done. Her face went completely white back. She couldn't even speak for a full minute. Victoria Hartwell, speechless. Oh my God, I wish I'd been there. I wish I'd seen it. Rebecca was practically cackling with glee. What did she say when she finally found words? She accused me of manipulating James, of turning him against her. I pulled into the driveway, turning off the engine. But then Marcus read James's letter, the one explaining exactly why he transferred the house, and it called her out on everything. Years of undermining our marriage, constant criticism, making me feel like a guest in my own home. In front of everyone, Aunt Margaret, Cousin David, about 6 other relatives, all sitting there listening to James tell his mother that she had driven him to hide legal documents from her. I leaned back against the headrest, the weight of the morning finally hitting me.
There was a pause on the other end. How do you feel? That was the question, wasn't it? How did I feel? Satisfied, I said slowly, testing the word. Vindicated. But also, I trailed off, trying to identify the other emotions swirling inside me. Sad, because James had to die for me to finally stand up for myself. Because it took a letter from beyond the grave to make Victoria see what she'd done to us. Emma, you know this wasn't about standing up for yourself earlier, right? You were in an impossible situation. James should have defended you while he was alive. That was his job. She was right, of course, but it didn't change the fact that I'd spent 15 years accepting treatment I should never have tolerated. How many times had I bitten my tongue? How many times had I let Victoria's comments slide, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight? I need to go back to the house today. Already? Don't you want to, I don't know, celebrate? Process? Drink an entire bottle of wine? I need to walk through that house as its actual owner, not as Victoria's barely tolerated daughter-in-law, not as someone who's about to be evicted, as Emma Hartwell, the woman whose name is on the deed. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Okay. Want company? No. I think I need to do this alone. But thank you for everything. Call me if you need me. And Emma, I'm proud of you. After we hung up, I sat in the car for a few more minutes, gathering my courage. Then I drove across town to the Hartwell mansion, to my home, for the first time as its rightful owner. The house looked different somehow, though nothing had physically changed. The Victorian architecture still loomed imposingly, the garden still stretched out in manicured perfection, the windows still gleamed in the afternoon sun. But my relationship to it had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't the fortress I had to breach anymore. It was mine. I used my key, the master key James had given me years ago, and stepped into the foyer. The house was silent. Victoria must have gone straight to the cottage after the disastrous will reading, probably to lick her wounds and plot her next move. Let her plot. There was nothing she could do. I walked slowly through each room, seeing them with new eyes. The sitting room where Victoria had delivered her eviction notice, I could redecorate it now, remove that horrible Victorian settee, bring in furniture that actually felt comfortable. The dining room where I'd felt like hired help,
I could host dinners for people I actually like without Victoria's critical gaze judging every detail.
The kitchen, where I'd always been happiest, could stay mostly the same. It was the one room Victoria had never cared about, which meant it was the one room where James and I had been able to make our own choices. I climbed the grand staircase to our bedroom. James's things were still everywhere. His books on the nightstand, his robe on the bathroom door. Eventually, I'd have to decide what to do with them, but not today. Today, I just needed to feel his presence one more time. I did it, I whispered to the empty room. I didn't back down. I stood up to her, just like you asked. The house remained silent, but somehow I felt James's approval. He'd given me this gift, this freedom, and I'd honored it by refusing to let his mother take it away. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Margaret Hartwell. I wanted you to know that I'm glad James left you the house. You deserved better than how Victoria treated you. Welcome home, dear." Then another text from Cousin David. "About time someone stood up to Aunt Victoria. James would be proud of you." I stared at the messages, unexpected tears forming. I'd assumed James's entire family would close ranks around Victoria, would see me as the outsider who'd stolen their heritage. But maybe some of them had seen the truth all along. Maybe some of them had been waiting for someone to finally call her out. Over the next few hours, more messages came. Relatives I barely knew, expressing support. Friends of James's from college, saying they'd always thought Victoria was too controlling. Even some of Victoria's own friends, gently suggesting that perhaps she'd overstepped. The tide was turning, and it was turning against her. Around 5 p.m., there was a knock at the door. I tensed, wondering if Victoria had worked up the courage to confront me on my own territory. But when I opened it, I found Marcus Chin standing on the porch, briefcase in hand. "Mrs. Hartwell, I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to drop off some additional documents and see how you're managing." "Please come in. And call me Emma." We settled in the sitting room, my sitting room now, and Marcus pulled out a thick folder. "These are copies of everything related to the house transfer, along with information about the property taxes, utilities, maintenance accounts. James set up a trust to cover all the ongoing expenses, so you won't have to worry about the financial burden of keeping this place running." "He thought of everything," I murmured, overwhelmed again by how carefully James had planned this. "He did. He came to me 3 months ago, said he'd been thinking about this for years, but had finally found the courage to act." Marcus paused, his professional demeanor softening. "James talked about you a lot during our meetings, Emma, about how patient you'd been, how much you'd sacrificed to try to fit into his family. He felt tremendous guilt about not standing up for you sooner. He didn't have to do this. The house, I mean. I would have figured something out. He wanted you to have security, independence, a place where you could make your own decisions without his mother's interference." Marcus smiled slightly. He also said, and I quote, "Emma deserves to throw out that god-awful Victorian settee and get furniture that actual human beings can sit on comfortably." I burst out laughing, tears streaming down my face. He said that? Word for word. I wrote it down because it was so uncharacteristic of him to criticize anything his mother had chosen. Marcus's expression turned serious. "Emma, James loved you very much. This house isn't just property. It's his apology for every time he let her hurt you. It's his way of saying you mattered more than the family legacy." After Marcus left, I walked through the house again, this time opening windows, letting fresh air into rooms that had felt suffocating for so long. I pulled down the heavy drapes in the sitting room that Victoria had insisted were historically appropriate, revealing windows that flooded the space with light. In the study, I carefully unpacked the boxes I'd stored at Rebecca's. James's books, his papers, his photographs. I arranged them exactly how I wanted, without worrying about whether they fit with the Hartwell aesthetic. And yes, I made a note to replace that Victorian settee as soon as possible. As the sun set, painting the walls golden, my phone rang one more time. Rebecca. "So, how does it feel to be the lady of the manor?" "Weird. Good weird. Liberating weird." I looked around the study, at the life I was beginning to build. "Beck, I think I'm going to be okay. Actually okay, not just surviving." "Of course you are. You're Emma Carson Hartwell, the woman who beat Victoria at her own game. Have you heard from her, by the way, Victoria?" "Not a word. I assume she's barricaded herself in the cottage, plotting my downfall." "Let her plot. She can't touch you now." That night, I slept in my bedroom, the master bedroom of my house, for the first time without feeling like a guest who might be asked to leave at any moment. I slept better than I had since James's death.
Over the following weeks, word spread through Willow Creek about what had happened. The story took on a life of its own, the controlling mother-in-law who tried to evict her daughter-in-law, only to discover the house belonged to the widow all along. Some people saw it as a victory for me, others saw it as a tragic family conflict. A few sided with Victoria, claiming I'd manipulated James somehow. I didn't care what they thought anymore. I redecorated. I hosted dinners for Rebecca and Aunt Margaret and other people who'd shown me kindness. I finally hung up all the photos of James and me that Victoria had never allowed in the common areas. I painted the dining room walls a soft sage green that I'd always loved but had never been allowed to suggest. I made the Hartwell mansion into Emma's home. Victoria and I never spoke again. She stayed in the cottage, venturing out for errands but avoiding me completely. Sometimes I'd see her in town, and she'd look right through me as if I didn't exist. That was fine. After 15 years of trying to earn her approval, the silence was actually peaceful. 3 months after the will reading, I was having coffee with Rebecca in my newly renovated sitting room, complete with comfortable furniture that actual human beings could sit on, when she asked the question I'd been asking myself. "Do you regret it, the way you handled everything?" I thought about it carefully. No. I regret that James felt he had to hide his decision from me. I regret that he died before we could build the life he'd planned for us. But standing up to Victoria, finally claiming my place in this house, no regrets at all. And the revenge part, letting her think she'd won, then crushing her in front of the whole family. I smiled, remembering Victoria's face in that conference room. Maybe that was petty. Maybe I should have just shown her the deed transfer privately, ended it quickly. But Beck, she spent 15 years making me feel small. She waited one day after my husband's funeral to try to throw me out of my home. She deserved to feel what I felt, even if just for a moment. So you're saying you enjoyed it? I'm saying justice felt good. Is that so wrong? Rebecca raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. To justice, and to comfortable furniture, and to Emma Hartwell, who finally got her happy ending. I clinked my cup against hers, looking around at the home I'd fought for, the life I was rebuilding. Not an ending, I corrected, a beginning. Because that's what this was, really. Not the end of my story with the Hartwell family, but the beginning of my story as myself. Emma Carson Hartwell, widow, homeowner, survivor. The woman who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well. It's standing up for yourself. It's claiming the life you deserve, even when, especially when, someone tells you that you don't belong. James had given me the tools, the house, the letter, the courage to finally fight back. But I'd been the one to use them. And that, more than any property deed or inheritance, was what made this victory truly mine.